I'm Laura Bonnell, and this is the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast coming to you from Detroit. Please subscribe and even rate and comment on our podcasts when it moves you. I learn something new with every podcast, and I'm always inspired by the people that are showcased here. We don't give medical advice. You need to connect with your doctor for that. I hope that this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast educates you and sparks some volunteering or advocacy. The CF community needs people like you. Thanks to our sponsors, Viatris and Vertex, for their support. I am going to give you a couple facts about our guest and also just start out by saying so much enthusiasm. Dr. Alan Cohen, who's the Chief Medical Officer of Arcturus Therapeutics, was so energized throughout this and really explains science so beautifully that you might want to be a scientist at the end of this. He's a board-certified pediatric pulmonologist with more than 35 years of experience, and we talk about where science started and where it is now, and I also begged him not to retire. And he was also the co-director of the largest pediatric lung transplant program in North America and has held faculty roles at leading institutions, including Johns Hopkins and Stanford, and just has so much to say about what they're doing at Arcturus for the final 10 to 15%. So you're going to enjoy our conversation and find out some personal things about Dr. Cohen as well. It's so great to see you, to meet you, and to have you on this podcast. Thank you, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here as well.
I am always excited to be with someone who has been in the pulmonary cystic fibrosis arena for 35 years you've been doing this?
Yes, very much so. It's been a long trip, but it's been a remarkable time to be a caregiver and now, being involved directly with clinical research benefiting this population. The arc of this period of time's been something that you wouldn't have ever anticipated. And all the textbooks, all the things that I learned back in medical school are essentially almost none of it's relevant anymore. That's a good thing because it meant that things have improved, they've changed, and certainly it's been reflected in the outcomes for children, young adults, and adults with cystic fibrosis.
I agree. It is so exciting. I was actually cleaning out some closets and I found that book. I think it's by Dr. Orenstein, that, what cystic fibrosis is. And so much is outdated now. It's just wonderful.
Yeah. It doesn't even make sense to print it in a book at this point now. Even printed journals, right? I think we've all switched over to electronic because the pace with which things are advancing has just been so remarkable. Particularly, since the 90s, right? Since the Human Genome Project. We'll probably get to it. But, the fact that I started medical school and my genetics textbook was about 1/4 of an inch thick. And we knew virtually nothing about the human genome. And then the Human Genome Project in the 90s pretty much told us 90+% of the entire human genome. And because of that, all of the advancements in gene editing and gene therapy and genetic medicines and our ability to target rare diseases and ultra rare diseases became feasible. So that changed the whole thing. So it's been remarkable and it hasn't been that long. It's not old news.
Right. I agree with you. And I think it's so exciting to talk to you and to talk to other scientists. The scientific world has grown, especially in CF, like you just said, so much and fast over time. It's incredible. I wonder, at your time at Arcturus, you're doing so much in CF, in respiratory, also in vaccines and other areas. Tell us a little bit about the excitement that you have, working there, and then we're going to get into other things too. But I wanted to talk about that because, to read about everything you're doing and to look at the therapeutics and all that you're doing as a company, I mean, I could talk with you all day about it. There's so much that's happening. Isn't that fulfilling for you and exciting?
Oh, yeah. It's remarkable. There's a lot of news and information out there about vaccines, for example. And you mentioned them a moment ago, and Arcturus is one of the companies that's helped shepherd the significant advances in science. Moderna's certainly done that. Pfizer's certainly done that, but so has Arcturus. And if you had to find something good and positive to speak about from the COVID-19 experience that we all managed to live through, it's that it created an opportunity for the science to be employed as quickly as possible for an urgent situation, of course. So all the technologies that led to the rapid availability of life-saving vaccines against COVID, and now the efforts towards influenza, are all because of scientific advances and technologies that we use at Arcturus. Lipid envelopes, lipid nanoparticles, which is just a little engineered lipid molecule that surrounds a piece of messenger RNA, and the ability to make synthetic messenger RNA in the speed and the time and the agility to do so sped up what would have normally been a 10 to 20 year time frame to develop a new vaccine down to just a few years. And it's that technology. I mean, the fact that from the start of the COVID outbreak to understanding what caused it, to then the genetic understanding of the molecule, to then the creation of a messenger RNA vaccine, and then to put it in a lipid envelope, do clinical trials and get it out to everybody. The span of that happened in just a few years. That would have never happened a decade or more ago. It's remarkable. Now, that experience has led us to being able to now think about how we would employ this towards more common diseases and not necessarily just infections. And that's actually the platform that we have here. That's what's exciting about the work that I'm doing here at Arcturus, is that we're developing and engineering very specific lipid envelopes, LNPs. We're taking messenger RNA in the case of cystic fibrosis. We're actually taking the genetic piece of information for the protein that's missing in people with cystic fibrosis, the CFTR protein. Mm-hmm. We're putting that in the envelope, and then we're actually aerosolizing it and delivering it to the lungs where the problem is, so that people will be able to then take the message, turn it into a protein. The envelope in the messenger RNA goes away. It's removed. It's broken down. And then the protein's able to do the job that it needs to, which is help facilitate sodium chloride normally on the surface of the lung to reduce mucus and to normalize its function so that hopefully people won't have the ongoing symptoms and medical problems associated with null mutations or people who have the genetic predisposition to not produce that protein at all. And that's the population with the highest unmet need. That's the group of patients we're actually targeting right now in our phase 2 study. So very exciting.
Exciting.
And we could take that protein and actually deliver it intravenously, targeting the liver for other diseases as well. I'm sorry, go ahead. You were going to ask.
No, I was just going to say, and for people who, because you're immersed in it, and I am as much as possible, obviously, as a parent of 2 girls with CF, but for people who don't understand, is that messenger RNA, it's like delivering the message, like you just explained, and then it's out of there kind of thing, is what you're saying, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you and I are not quite old enough to have been around in the early 1950s when Watson and Crick at the University of Cambridge in the UK first described the double helix, but certainly your kids, every kid, including us, learned about this in school. It's a double helix. So the DNA is the genetic information that we're talking about. It's the thing that encodes all of life and all of the proteins and all of the functions that keep us alive, both the animal kingdom and the human kingdom. So what we do is we now understand what goes on with the messages inside of DNA. DNA opens up, makes a message, messenger RNA. The messenger RNA is a single copy. That then makes a protein, and the protein is pretty much the activity in our body, whether it's an enzyme or another functional component of our cells that keep us functioning normally and alive. Sometimes there's just a genetic error there for whatever reason, and it's either not producing it or producing it in a non-functional way. And that's what goes on with cystic fibrosis. So what we've been able to do since the early 1950s, understanding that there's genetic codes in our cells, and then in the 1990s, what the specific genetic abnormalities are for cystic fibrosis and other rare diseases. Now what we're able to do is we're able to target those specific genetic abnormalities and either synthetically or in a laboratory setting, actually recreate the piece that we need. And in the case of genetic editing, you can actually try to replace it. That's a more permanent fix. So gene editing is a way to go in and try to target the cells and correct the abnormality. That's an advancement that's still emerging. Right. And the challenges there, I think, with gene editing are really making sure that you're just targeting the cells in your body that need the edit. You don't want to make changes in places that are fine, right? Being able to control that is a more permanent challenge. In our case, as you said correctly, we're giving a lipid envelope messenger RNA. It gets delivered into the lung, but then the lipid envelope gets metabolized. It gets broken down, goes away. The messenger RNA actually, once it goes in and helps create a protein, also goes away. And then really what you're left with is the protein. That's why our drug isn't just a single treatment. It needs to be readministered. So in our case right now, we're studying our medicine. ARCT-032 is the name of the medicine.
I was just going to ask you. Yeah. And by the way, sorry to interrupt, but your enthusiasm is fantastic. I love all your energy and enthusiasm. And as the chief medical officer, I mean, I think when people think of people who, I mean, you know, you're the big dog up there in Arcturus. And I just think it's lovely that you can explain it in terms everyone can understand. And you're obviously approachable and a sweet, sweet man. And I just wanted to say right away that I can tell that and feel that awesome vibe from you right away. And I just really appreciate it as a CF mom, a CF parent, as somebody who is trying to get the word out to others about what you're doing. I think that just your delivery of this information and accessibility is so important. So I just wanted to thank you for that. But please continue talking about that. Do you say it like ARCT-032?
Yeah. So just briefly. So our medicine, as you were saying, and it's important for people to understand because there's a lot of simultaneous advances going on in the field of medicine. And it's a good problem to have if you have a rare disease like cystic fibrosis, that given the relatively small number of people, the number of companies and sponsors and biotech companies that are focused on trying to help even this smallest group of patients, this 10 or 15% of people who aren't able to benefit from modulators, who aren't able to benefit from those classes of drugs, which have certainly been awe-inspiring. You know, we were talking a few minutes ago, right. When I started in the 1980s and 1990s, which isn't really that long ago.
It's
the
not.
Average survival of people with cystic fibrosis was initially in the teens. By the 80s, it was high school age. And by the time I finished my training and those modulators started to become available, now we're talking about people living into their 40s and currently well into their 60s on average. That's remarkable. When my first job out of training from National Jewish was at Washington University in St. Louis. I ran the largest pediatric lung and heart-lung transplant program in North America with my partner, George Mallory. And almost 35% of the children that we did lung transplants on had cystic fibrosis. Today, that's a much, much smaller number. That's a very good thing. Yeah, that's a very good thing. So it speaks to improvements in the field and how those in combination have really improved not just the longevity of people's lives, but the quality of their lives. And that's what we're hoping to do with our program, is to at least initially target that smaller population of about 10 or 15% of people who really don't benefit from or can't tolerate modulators and who don't make CFTR protein, our medicine should allow their bodies to start producing the protein in their lungs where it's needed and hopefully be functional so that we can correct that error and the protein that's missing in their lung and improve their lung function, their lung stability, reduce their respiratory infections, all the things that matter and that are life-limiting for individuals who are unable to use those medications.
And to my friends who are in that final, 10 or 15%, or the parents I know whose kids don't have a modulator, I mean, I know what I'm hearing from them, and I know how I feel having my kids on modulators and other parents don't have their kids on modulators. It's a whole different before and after. As a parent, you can breathe once your kids have the CF modulator. You have a whole different, like, oh my gosh, they're going to live. So my heart breaks for them. So I wonder, you must feel pressure. How do you feel about making this work? I mean, there are so many variables. If it was just for wishing, it would be done, right? But how are you feeling with the science of it all and the parents and patients that you're talking to about this hope?
What you hope to do is bring a safe and effective drug through clinical trials, initially in adults. So that's something that we haven't spoken about, but that's really important to be aware of. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and the European equivalent, the EMA, in general, even for rare diseases, if people are able to live with that condition into adulthood, they have us start our clinical trials in people over the age of 18. And that's just simply because they can consent. They understand the benefits and risks, and they can acquiesce. They can actively participate in the decision to be part of research, be a part of a study. As soon as we have sufficient data in adults to show that a drug is safe and ideally effective, that's when the FDA and the EMA allow us to do those studies in children in younger age groups. The same thing happened with the modulators. Even a small oral medicine started in adults, then went to adolescents, and then eventually went to children. Same thing's going to happen here. Now, of course, the place I'd love to go as a pediatric pulmonary doctor is I'd like to start with the kids because you'd like to get in as soon as you can so you can mitigate the injury and the damage before and not play catch up. But we can't. So frustration number one to your question is I'd love to start with children, but in this case, for all sorts of logical reasons, we can't. But you want to go quickly. You want to go thoughtfully. And you want to do it in a way so that every patient matters, so that in the course of trying to run to the finish line as quickly as we can, we do so in a way that's respectful of individuals, also is thoughtful in terms of making sure that we're not getting ahead of ourselves, and that you're doing it in a way that you're paying attention every time you enroll a patient. You learn something new about your drug and how it works and how maybe it doesn't work and how it's tolerated or maybe it isn't. And you make adjustments along the way if you can, so that by the time we get to the finish line, we have a drug that achieves what we hope it will be. And in this case, it would be a way to either stabilize the lung function of people with null mutations with cystic fibrosis and or either stabilize it or perhaps try to recoup some of the lung function from their starting point. And that can be administered safely and chronically in people for the remainder of their life, because it's not a permanent fix. It's a medication, just like all the other supporting medications that people have, but it targets the actual specific problem causing the lung disease in these individuals, the lack of CFTR, that protein in the lung.
It's a guesstimation, but how much longer do you have to go? I'm sure parents are like, when's this going to be ready? And when can my child or adult try this?
You'd be surprised how many people ask that question. So let me try to answer it. The reality is that we're talking, as I mentioned earlier, about a very small number of patients. And fortunately, there are a number of other clinical trials going on with other sponsors, with other biotech and pharma companies. So we're not just doing the study right now in the United States. We're actually going to be expanding to other parts of the world. Right now, we're in our phase 2. So what we have done thus far, so we have an active phase 2 study going on right now in people with null mutations, ones who are not producing any CFTR in their lungs. And we're targeting adults right now in about a dozen sites in the United States. And we are doing dose escalation. So sometimes what you need to do is you start with a lower dose, and then you go up in the dose, and then sometimes you go up again. Sometimes it becomes a question of, are you giving enough medicine to the right place in the right amount? And the balance is enough medicine to show an effect, and balance that with, are there things we need to be offsetting, such as tolerability? Does it make you cough? Does it reduce your lung function? Does it cause inflammation? Those sorts of things. So right now we've got 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams. We're in the process right now of starting a 15 milligram arm. Okay. And we're doing that in adults. And that's called our phase 2 study. Once we finish this next portion of the phase 2 study, we have been studying patients for 4 weeks. And we believe that going longer is going to be important, particularly in a chronic condition. So this current study is going to go for 3 months. So it's going to be a daily dose administered at home over 3 months. And then what we hope to do in this adult study is have that information back by sometime at the end of this year into early next year. So fairly imminent. Mm-hmm. And then be able to take that information, sit down with the regulatory authorities, with the FDA, perhaps the EMA, and then talk to them about, based on the data that we have here, how many patients will we need to study for a pivotal trial, or what's called a phase 3 study. And in a rare disease like this, it's usually just a single study. So the plan would be to look at a study it could be a few dozen, or it could be up to 100 patients. We have to see what our data shows, and then we can do calculations statistically to figure out how many patients would we need to show a benefit that's statistically rigorous. So those unknowns, we don't have those results yet, but we're going to be generating this data throughout this year, both in the United States and outside of the US, in adults. And then we hope by the early part of next year to have the results, talk to the FDA, and plan our phase 3 study. Phase 3 study could take another year and a half. And then, so we're talking about 26, 27. So we're talking about maybe 2028. So I assure you, if I could go faster, I would. And our plan is to try to, because I know every day matters. And every day is important. And while we're busy planning and executing, people are living their lives, trying to stay healthy and trying not to lose lung function, while therapies that may benefit them or stabilize them or reverse their disease to some degree are being developed. So it's a waiting game, but we're not talking about something that's 5 or 10 years away. We're talking about clarity on our program within the next 2 to 3 years.
Right. And that's so hopeful and so exciting, because I remember talking with Dr. Francis Collins after the Genome Project. He said, well, I thought we were going to have it'd be a year. And then it was like, well, it's taken a lot longer.
I was at that cystic fibrosis meeting many years ago where he pulled out his guitar and wrote that song, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room.
Right. I know.
Yeah.
I know. Gosh, we love that man.
Yeah. But it turns out that although in many ways it seems like a simple problem, right? We now know where the genetic defect is, and we can certainly recreate the genetic message and make the protein. And we've shown this in animals that we can replace the protein, improve lung function, normalize sodium chloride channels. We can do all that in a laboratory setting. Humans are a little bit more complicated. And certainly people who have suffered injuries and have mucus in their lungs, have infections in their lung, by targeting that area of the lung that already has injuries, that already has complex medical things going on, it's not like the circumstance that we sometimes find ourselves in a laboratory setting. It's more complicated. And our bodies have been built to defend itself against things that have no business being in our bodies, right? So sometimes you trigger and invoke those pathways. So it's certainly It's certainly more challenging than I think Dr. Collins and many of us thought it was going to be, but we're still talking about advances over the last 40 years.
Right. And these modulators, I mean, it hasn't been that long. And so what you're doing, even in phase 2, those parents, I mean, there must be so much hope. And I would think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that these clinical trials, I mean, I know sometimes it's hard to get people to join clinical trials, but it seems like for this, that everybody would say like, hey, I'm good. Let me in. I want to be part of this. Do you expect that?
And that's correct. I think here's the good news. The good news is that there are options and there are choices. The good news about our study is that, as I mentioned earlier, since the lipid envelope, the LNP, and the messenger RNA are delivered and they're metabolized, they're broken down, and the protein that's produced is there for a period of time and then eventually gets also broken down. Eligibility in our study and the ability for people to be a part of our study, and then if there's another study downstream that they're interested in participating in, they shouldn't be excluded from those studies either. So I think as people are trying to decide what studies to be in, gene editing studies, and I worked in the gene editing space, so I certainly know what an incredible field that is, but where the challenges are is that you're going in and trying to correct something genetically permanently. And if people participate in those kinds of studies, it may make it difficult or ineligible to be a participant in other additional clinical trials that may come downstream in the next few years. So I think that's probably part of the equation. Also with children, as I mentioned, at least in cystic fibrosis, since, thank goodness, people live into adult age, these studies more often than not start in the adult space. So if you're a 7-year-old, an 8 or 12-year-old, you may have to wait until enough data has been generated to show that a drug is safe and effective in an adult group before you're eligible. But we certainly are working with the FDA, and they have a pathway forward for that, where they want to make sure that kids are not left out and that data doesn't get realized and doesn't get generated. So there's a very strong impetus to get children into clinical trials if their families believe that it's appropriate. And we want them to be a part of that dialogue. We want them to be participants, but you certainly want to do so in a way that doesn't put them in harm's way unknowingly.
And I want to point out to people too that you and everyone I've met and talked to in Arcturus are so grounded in the CF community and in the rare disease community. You know who your target audience is. You know who your people are. You know who you're helping. I think that there's a lot of stereotypes of, oh, this company or that company is just trying to make money. And I think that we appreciate all the, touching base with people that you do. And one thing I want to brag about on your behalf is that you're doing this team building with the Bonnell Foundation, and you've got your whole team that that's packed up our hospital bags, and you're giving them out to clinics in California where you're based. So I just think that's really important that you're doing these projects and getting involved in the community. What does it mean to you to be a part of all of this?
Yeah, and realize that I'm sort of just the tip of the spear in our company. I just happen to be a pediatric lung specialist who's been involved with CF care since I was a medical student, a resident, and a fellow. It was certainly a long time ago. But even our non-scientists, even our PhDs who are really more basic science researchers, it's very important to not only meet and understand, but know the disease. And if you're fortunate enough to meet the families, to meet the children, meet the adults who are impacted by these diseases and the urgency that you're talking about, understanding that it's personal for these people, and then embrace that as part of the motivation and the reason to get out of bed every day and work harder and do it better. And to your point earlier, do it as fast as you can, as thoughtfully as you can. That's critical. That's critical. So, I've been involved in clinical research since Pulmozyme, since the early days of Pulmozyme, Toby, a number of drugs that didn't make it, including the modulators. So I've had the good fortune of being involved with the pathway of advancements in this field from the very beginning, and to have the opportunity and the privilege to be a part of that continuum and to help contribute, even if you are benefiting patients you're never going to meet. I mean, that's been the interesting thing about working in biotech, is that, I until the pandemic, I was still seeing patients at Stanford University and cystic fibrosis in patients, in fact. But since the pandemic, I've been mostly focused full time on drug development. So even though I'm not meeting families and taking care of patients one at a time currently, the fact that I know that the therapies we're developing now will benefit not just 20 patients a day in a clinic, but hundreds, if not thousands of patients in my lifetime that I may never meet, is perfectly
so cool.
fine. Yeah. And people here feel that way. We take it personal, and we realize how important our work is, and we do our best to be sensitive to that.
And it is a beautiful thing. I mean, 35 years you've been in this. What are your hopes for the future? And I just wanted to follow it up with that question, is hopes for the future, but I am worried that will there be enough doctors that are coming after you? I mean, know so much. You know when it started. You know all the problems. It's so different now, and I just hope there's enough people that, decide to follow your lead and learn from you.
I certainly hope so. Healthcare. One of my sons is actually going into he's a gastroenterologist, and so there certainly are. And getting into medical school, from what I could see, has not gotten any easier since I went to school. So there's certainly a long line of people that are trying to get in the queue and to work in healthcare. And quite honestly, if my hope and expectation would be that, just like the morbidity and the mortality associated with cystic fibrosis has gone from 35% of the people in my lung transplant program in the 90s and early 2000s being people suffering and dying from end-stage CF lung disease, to now that being a very, very, very small percentage. And people now needing to plan for college and for a full life. We had very different conversations in the clinic when I was still taking care of families and patients 25, 30 years ago. For people to not look beyond, am I going to make it through high school, is a very different conversation to, well, you need to be worrying about getting to college. You need to be worrying about a career. You need to be worrying about your personal life. You may need to worry about, do you want to have children someday? Those are very different conversations than we used to have before. And you know what? It's a wonderful thing. The good news is that I think, my hope, my expectations are that we and hopefully others will be successful in targeting this subset of patients right now that sadly are really not benefiting from current therapies and standards of care as magnanimously as others, and that we won't leave them behind. That's certainly the mission of the CF Foundation. That's certainly our mission as well. We want to help this subset of patients. And then if our drug proves to be successful and useful, widening that to see if there are additional populations that are on modulators that maybe could even do better than they are. That would certainly be my hope, wish, and expectation. And then we're also targeting other rare diseases, metabolic disorders that are horrible, where, children can't make it into school age. We're targeting another disease right now called OTC deficiency. That's a disease where in children, those kids present as soon as they start eating protein with really terrible medical problems because they don't metabolize protein normally, and they end up with very high ammonia levels, and they can have seizures and be groggy and not grow and thrive. And we're right now targeting, with our same technology, with a different genetic message, the liver to produce that protein. And our hope right now is that we're working with adults with that disease. Now we're hoping to target children in the near future. So my hope is that we can take our science, our brilliant scientists and advances, bring them forward to benefit children and adults with a variety of rare diseases, and in addition, continue to make modern vaccines available that are even more effective and preventative against, infections like COVID, influenza, and others. So yeah, I mean, that's a great exclamation point at the end of my career, which has a few more years to go.
I hope so. And it is very exciting. And I'm glad you brought that up because, like you said before, the OTC and CF, they could benefit each other. I mean, it's all protein stuff you're working on, which is, it's just so interesting not having a scientific mind and trying to literally, understand everything. It's very interesting. But with that inhaled procedure that you're talking about, then if it's just for the lungs, there would be another modulator or drug for everything else. Is that correct?
Yes. So right now, by targeting the lung, so ourselves and other research companies and sponsors that are targeting the lung are really focusing the effect of that drug in the place where the disease is most pronounced, where the problem is most extreme. Reduction, trying to either stabilize or reduce the injury to the lung, which is the life-limiting aspect of the disease for this population. Individuals who benefit from our drug, if we're able to get to the finish line with a phase 3 program, would still need to continue on enzyme replacement therapy, all the other standard therapeutic benefits for their gut, for their GI tract, for their nutrition. It wouldn't be an end-all be-all, correct?
And maybe you can't answer this question that just popped into my head, but I thought, and if you can't, that's fine. But when we're talking about a cure, what does that mean? So what you're doing now and the modulators that are approved and are being taken, those correct the underlying defect of CF. So I guess I kind of haven't thought, like, what does a cure mean? It permanently fixes everything? What does that mean? Can you even visualize it or think about that yet?
Well, of course, how high is the sky? How deep is the ocean? That would be glorious. And there certainly have been some ultra rare diseases, not cystic fibrosis currently, where there's a specific genetic defect that is discrete and homogeneous. It's consistent for the disease in all people suffering from that disease. And being able to fix that, at least in small numbers of patients, has proven to be successful. Hemophilia is a good example. So there's some gene editing approaches that have been done through the NIH where a small number of people suffering from sickle cell disease, for example, or hemophilia have been able to have their disease corrected to the point where it looks like it's a cure. The challenge with cystic fibrosis, as you probably know, is that there's almost 2,000 genetic mutations that fall under this umbrella of what we call cystic fibrosis. And that's why there's such a wide range of disease that you see manifesting. You'll see people who are born with bowel obstruction at birth, and then you'll see people who have genetic point mutations, even no mutations, who are 65, 70 years old, and the only manifestation they have is infertility. Or they may have some pancreatitis, some mild disease. They may not have much lung disease. It's a very wide range. So I think the earliest advances in cures with genetic editing will probably be, and are proving to be, in those diseases where it's a discrete, straightforward genetic defect, maybe a base pair, one little component, one letter within the long stream of genetic information that we've been talking about. So I think that's where the advances are happening. And a cure at some point would be an ability to safely insert the genetic information to code for the full protein, CFTR in this case, so that the body can keep that message. It will endure, and the body can somehow continue to produce that protein for the life of the individual. It's a little tricky because you have to get into what's called stem cells or basilar cells, cells that make new cells that are constantly being replaced. So it's complicated. Right now, I would be enormously satisfied if we could do what we're trying to do, which is not modest. And that is to take people who don't make this protein at all and teach their bodies and their cells to make it, produce it, fold it, move it to the surface, and have it be functional. It's a lot of steps there.
It is.
Right now, I made it sound simpler than it is, but in many ways, it's a complicated process. But our hope and expectation is that if we can just slow down the inevitable worsening of lung function in these individuals and give them a full or normal life with reduced symptoms and better quality, that would be the goal. I mean, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's not a baby step. That's a big step.
Right.
And that may be suitable for most people for the balance of their lives.
No, I agree with you. And I think you did make it very simple for us, but it's very clearly complicated. And there's many steps to go through. Before we wrap it up, though, I just wanted to ask you, is there anything you wanted to mention about the future in Arcturus, what you're doing, other things? Because you do have many different things and other diseases that you're working on. But I just wondered if there was anything else you wanted to say. And then I just had one last sort of personal question to ask you. But yeah.
I think you said it earlier. I think, one would hope, and kudos to the Bonnell Foundation and the work that you're doing. I've had the good fortune of getting very close with families and with the children and the next generation of children who are dealing with the complexities and the issues of cystic fibrosis. So being able to be a part of their lives, their healthcare, and to certainly be a part of helping to shepherd new therapies and new opportunities for health and well-being in this population has been a privilege. So what I would encourage your listeners to do, either the families or the patients themselves, is to really pursue and look into participating in clinical research. There is a very small number of people with null mutations and these genetic defects that are available and potentially eligible to participate in studies. And this work will only move forward if we're able to involve as many of them as possible in our clinical trials. The good news, as I mentioned about our program, is that our therapy, when you stop taking it in our clinical trial, the effects of it should wane over time, and the ability to participate in other clinical trials, if you choose to do so, should avail itself. So it doesn't make you ineligible. So I think that's a misnomer for people. Number two, once you get past phase 1, which is just trying to prove that a drug is safe and effective, and you get into phase 2, now we're looking at the nuances of, well, how effective is our drug, and how do we document that we're helping people? Then phase 3 is just simply a numbers game to get as many people in the study as you need to be able to show that you are having a truly statistically meaningful improvement relative to not being on the medicine. So participating in late stage phase 2 and phase 3 studies is really the fuel that keeps this engine rolling. And we really, really do need you to join us and participate in these kinds of trials for us to ever bring them forward. We're going outside of the United States because there are even larger numbers in some countries of people with these null mutations. So we're going to the areas of the world where they even have less opportunity to benefit from current therapies, which is a tragedy. But being able to participate and having a conversation with your doctor, and then we're more than happy to give educational information. We have people on our team that produce educational pamphlets, and we're available. We do try to participate in local, regional, national, and international CF meetings and try to get as much understandable, easy to understand information available. And we are always available to answer questions. So we want to be transparent. We are certainly a part of the community, and being able to help people with CF, being able to help people with OTC deficiency, people suffering from COVID, influenza, and then some of our other platform programs that are preclinical right now. Being able to just help society and perhaps mitigate illness, I don't think there's a higher calling. I'm just happy and privileged to be a part of this.
Well, we're very grateful for all you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And just a real quick wrap up, since we got to meet your wife briefly before we started the podcast, we don't want you to retire. We don't want that. But just a quick, to give people a little something about you, what do you like? Is there a way that a scientist who's so busy with such a huge responsibility, I mean, do you go fishing? Like, how do you get to go on vacations? What are some things you love to do as just a regular human being?
Yeah, I'm glad my wife left the room. I don't know that she would be supporting the statement I'm about to make, which is, I thought I was a regular human being.
Well, you know what I mean.
I know. Deep down, I'm a pediatrician and I love kids. And so I currently am fortunate to live in Northern California. We live near the ocean, outside of San Francisco in Sonoma County. It's pretty here. So now I've gotten into all sorts of crazy things like mushroom foraging.
Wow.
And then just hanging around at the beaches here in Northern California and just, traveling all over the world. We have a European cystic fibrosis meeting coming up in a few months in Lisbon. Looking forward to.
I'll get to meet you in person there.
Right. So I just
Fabulous.
signed up for the meeting this week, just working on my plans. I haven't been to Lisboa in probably 25, 30 years.
Wow.
So love to travel. And if I can tie a little bit of going to a museum, wandering around, eating some nice food, while participating in a scientific meeting, even better. And then just watching my kids grow up. I have a son who I mentioned earlier is now a gastroenterologist, another son in finance. So just being able to see the next generation of my kids sort of go on with life and contribute and sort of be a part of the world. I don't think there's a greater joy in that. And you mentioned earlier, the families and the patients with CF that are waiting. I get that urgency because not just being a pediatrician and caring for other people's children, but watching my own grow up and understanding that when they get sick, what an impact that has on everybody, the ripple effect of that. We take it personal. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in Lisbon and seeing what new advances get presented at that meeting. And thank you for your time. This was lovely. I don't get to do this much, but I appreciate your time.
I appreciate yours too. You're delightful. And we learned so much in this podcast. So thank you for joining.
Thank you. Lovely. Be well.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Vertex Pharmaceutical, The Science of Possibility, and Viatris. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.